The Young and the Restless spoilers. In the heart of Genoa City, the air was thick with tension, and the rumors swirling through the police department were more unsettling than any case the town had ever seen. A killer was on the loose, but what was even more alarming was the fact that the authorities seemed to be circling closer to an unsettling conclusion, one that could shatter everything. The police were finally closing in on the murderer responsible for a recent tragedy, and it was none other than Mitch Bacall, the seemingly innocent husband of Sienna Bacall, a woman who held a mysterious grip on the undercurrents of the town's most powerful families. The truth was slowly beginning to surface, but there were far more secrets to uncover than anyone could have anticipated. The case had taken a chilling turn when the police, after weeks of searching for clues, finally identified Mitch as the one responsible for the tragic accident that had rocked Genoa City to its core. The implications of this revelation were staggering, especially when the man in question was married to someone as influential and powerful as Sienna. Mitch, a man with a mysterious past, had been living quietly under the radar, but it was clear that his connections ran deeper than anyone could have suspected. And what made the situation even more confusing was the fact that Sienna, despite her ongoing relationship with Mitch, had been anything but forthcoming about the man she'd chosen to marry. Roger Howarth, a veteran actor known for his ability to play the most enigmatic of characters, had been cast to portray Mitch. But his character had yet to make his grand debut. Fans, and those working on the show, could sense that this character's arrival would mark a turning point in the entire storyline. It was clear that Mitch's re-entry into the public eye would come with an explosion of truth, and that truth would be the key to unraveling the layers of deception Sienna had been carefully weaving for years. The police had been working tirelessly to locate Mitch. Their investigation had led them to a hidden location, one that was crucial to the case. Word quickly spread that Mitch had been tracked down and was being brought into the police station for questioning. The news was mysterious, shrouded in secrecy, as details of the arrest were kept tightly under wraps. The only information that had been leaked was the fact that Mitch was finally in custody, and Sienna's reaction to the news was anything but what the public expected. In a dramatic turn of events, Sienna had been seen outside the police station, hysterically crying as the news of her husband's arrest broke. The once poised and controlled woman, known for her ability to keep secrets, was now publicly unraveling. The sight of her outside the police station, visibly distraught and breaking down in front of the media, only raised more questions. What had Mitch done? What was the truth behind the accident? And why was Sienna so visibly shaken by the arrest? It was clear that Sienna had been hiding something, a secret so dark that it could change everything. Was Mitch truly the mastermind behind the accident, or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? The police were determined to get to the bottom of it, but the fact that Sienna was so emotionally compromised only added to the mystery. Why had she been so involved with Mitch? Why hadn't she ever revealed the full extent of her relationship with him? As the investigation unfolded, it became evident that there were far more questions than answers. Mitch's arrest had only scratched the surface of the complexities of the case. The deeper the police dug, the more they uncovered about Sienna and her hidden connections to the town's most powerful figures. The layers of deception ran deep, and it was becoming apparent that Mitch wasn't the only one with skeletons in the closet. The police quickly realized that the situation was more complicated than they had first believed. As they gathered evidence and spoke to witnesses, it became clear that Mitch's actions were not the isolated incident they had assumed. There were whispers of corruption, shady dealings, and dangerous alliances that extended beyond Mitch himself. Was it possible that Sienna had known more than she was letting on? Could she have been complicit in the accident, or was there someone else pulling the strings behind the scenes? The shocking truth was, no one knew for sure. Yet, as the investigation continued, new pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Mitch's past, which had once been a closely guarded secret, was slowly being revealed. His ties to organized crime and shady business dealings raised more questions than answers. Was Mitch truly the mastermind behind the tragedy, or had he been a pawn in someone else's game? The more the police uncovered, the more they realized how far-reaching the conspiracy went. Sienna, in her grief-stricken state, had remained largely silent, but her emotional breakdown outside the police station was a cry for help that no one had expected. Was she truly mourning her husband's arrest? Or was she afraid of what would happen once the full extent of Mitch's actions came to light? And more importantly, what was the secret she was desperately trying to hide? As the investigation progressed, the public's opinion of Sienna began to shift. No longer seen as a woman of power and control, she was now being viewed through a different lens. Had she been involved in Mitch's criminal activities all along, or was she a victim of his manipulation? The truth was elusive, but with each passing day, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The police, led by their tireless efforts, had begun to piece together the mystery, but what they discovered was far more than anyone had bargained for. The deeper they went, the more complicated the case became. Mitch's past, Sienna's hidden agenda, and the tragedy that had unfolded all seemed to converge into one explosive moment. And then, in a shocking twist, new evidence surfaced that pointed to a completely different suspect. Someone close to Sienna, someone who had been operating in the shadows for years, had orchestrated the events that led to the tragic accident. It was a revelation that left everyone speechless, and Sienna, once again, found herself at the center of a web of lies and deceit that threatened to destroy everything she had worked for. As the investigation reached its climax, the truth about Mitch, Sienna, and the hidden forces at play was finally revealed. The police had uncovered a trail of corruption, betrayal, and manipulation that stretched far beyond the initial accident. But in the end, it was Sienna's own secrets, the ones she had kept buried for so long, that proved to be the most dangerous of all. The shocking revelation left the town of Genoa City in turmoil. Sienna, once a woman of power and influence, was now a suspect in a deadly game of lies and manipulation. The police had finally uncovered the truth, but the consequences of their findings would ripple through the town for years to come. In the end, the truth about Mitch, Sienna, and the dark forces that had controlled their lives was finally out in the open. The people of Genoa City would never be the same, and neither would Sienna. As the dust settled, the question remained, how far would Sienna go to protect her secrets, and who else would be dragged into the chaos before it was all over? The story was far from over. The truth about Mitch's confession at the police station remains shrouded in mystery, with everyone waiting on edge to learn exactly what he has revealed. The town of Genoa City is holding its breath, hoping that the accident was nothing more than a tragic, accidental event, with no sinister hand guiding Mitch toward such a destructive path. However, this is the young and the restless we're talking about, where nothing ever happens by chance, and every twist is calculated with precision. It was clear from the start that Mitch's involvement in the incident was no ordinary accident. The timing, the circumstances surrounding it, and the level of planning required to pull off something of this magnitude all pointed towards something more calculated, someone pulling the strings from behind the scenes. This wasn't an isolated incident where Mitch just lost control. No, this was part of a larger, more intricate plot that had been carefully devised and orchestrated by someone with deep ties and immense power in the town. But who? The question on everyone's mind is, who is the mastermind behind the tragedy that led Mitch to kill Noah? Who stood behind the scenes, pulling the strings, manipulating Mitch to carry out such a horrible act? While Mitch may have been the one to physically carry out the crime, someone else was behind it all, orchestrating every move, ensuring everything went according to plan. Nick and Sharon, devastated by the loss of their son and driven by a burning desire for revenge, were beside themselves with grief. Their emotions were raw, their hearts broken, and the anger that simmered beneath the surface was palpable. They wanted Mitch to pay, no, they wanted him to suffer for what he had done to their family, to their son. Thoughts of taking matters into their own hands consumed them. But as much as they wanted to exact justice with their own hands, they knew deep down that they had to let the police do their job. Justice had to come from the system, not from vengeance. But as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Mitch wasn't just a pawn in the larger game. He was speaking. And what he had to say would change everything. The police, after a series of grueling interrogations, managed to get Mitch to finally crack. He revealed the unthinkable, the true mastermind behind the plot, the one who had orchestrated the entire tragedy, was someone with power, influence, and the ability to manipulate the town's affairs from the shadows. Someone they never saw coming. As Mitch's confession trickled out, it became clear that the person behind the curtains, pulling the strings, was none other than Victor Newman. The revelation sent shockwaves through Genoa City, leaving everyone speechless. Victor, long known for his ruthlessness and his unrelenting drive to control everything and everyone in his orbit, had taken his thirst for power to new heights. For years, Victor had been the untouchable force in Genoa City, the man everyone feared, respected, and often resented. His control over his family, his empire, and the lives of those around him had always been seen as near infallible. But this act of manipulation, was something even darker than anyone had expected. Why would Victor go so far as to orchestrate Noah's death? The answer, as shocking as it was, made perfect sense when you considered all the moving parts of Victor's empire. Noah, as the son of Nick and Sharon, represented the next generation, the future of the Newman family. But he was also a liability, a loose end in Victor's plans. In Victor's world, no one could stand in the way of his ambitions, and Noah, though beloved by his family, had unwittingly become an obstacle. Victor had carefully planned every move. He knew Mitch's weaknesses, and he knew how to manipulate him into carrying out the deadly task. Mitch, under the guise of being an ally, had been used as the perfect instrument in a much larger game. His arrest and the subsequent revelation of his involvement were part of Victor's plan to cover his own tracks, to make it appear as though the whole thing was a tragic, random accident. But behind it all, the true puppet master was none other than Victor, the man who had manipulated the situation from the start. Nick and Sharon, upon hearing the truth, were torn between disbelief and fury. How could Victor, the man they once considered family, go so far? How could he have plotted to destroy their lives in such a cold, calculated way? Their pain, already overwhelming from losing Noah, was now compounded by this shocking betrayal. The idea that Victor, someone they had trusted, could be behind their son's death was too much to bear. The anger burned through them both. They wanted justice, not just for Noah, but for the countless others who had been hurt by Victor's insatiable thirst for control. But they also knew that the battle against Victor would be no easy feat. He had spent decades carefully crafting his legacy, and he had resources and allies at his disposal that no one could match. The thought of going up against Victor in a public battle was terrifying, but it was the only way to ensure that Mitch's death would not be in vain. As the story unfolded, it became clear that the web of deception was far more complicated than anyone had ever imagined. Mitch, though complicit in Noah's death, was merely a pawn in a much larger game, a game orchestrated by Victor, whose grasp on power extended far beyond what anyone had thought possible. The repercussions of this revelation would shake Genoa City to its core, leaving everyone reeling from the truth of the family's darkest secrets. In the aftermath, questions lingered. What would Victor's empire look like now? Would his family finally turn on him, seeing him for the manipulative force he had always been? And more importantly, would Nick and Sharon be able to find peace, knowing that the man they had once considered a patriarch was responsible for destroying their world? Victor Newman's reign of power in Genoa City was far from over, but his grip on it had just begun to slip. As the truth emerged and the consequences of his actions unfolded, the town would never be the same. What had once seemed like a carefully controlled world was now a ticking time bomb, and it was only a matter of time before the fallout from Victor's manipulations would destroy everything he had spent years building. The battle for Genoa City's future was just beginning.